Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. We are on episode number 52, chapter 3, part 1, Yoga of Divine Works. In that chapter 3, and we are starting at paragraph number 9. In the last episode, Aurobindo gave us the picture of, on one hand, the need for an integral approach that brings together love, knowledge, and will, but at the same time, the reality that each individual is unique and there is a natural path each one has to follow. So there may be a need for some to enter through one and let other parts wait. Particularly, the context is the yoga of divine works and tendency to postpone the yoga of works, that is, aligning your will with the divine will. If that happens, when there is a delay in that process, and if you grow inwardly rich, you might find this gap between the inner realizations and the inability to express it in outer life. We are looking at an integral yoga where the inner and the outer and all parts of being are brought together into transformational journey. And for that, ideal is to combine all three. So the process is integral. However, in this part of the book, Aurobindo is focusing on the yoga of divine works and entering through works. When you enter through works, how do you integrate other dimensions so that the yoga is integral and it touches upon all parts of the being and integrates inner and the outer. We start with paragraph number 9, and link to this chapter will be there in the description. And please start with the paragraph number 9, that is where we are beginning. The greatest gospel of spiritual works ever yet given to the race, the most perfect system of Karmayoga known to man in the past, is to be found in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita occupies a very special role in the Indian spiritual traditions. It is one book that has an unusual setting. It is revealed in the battleground, and it is a book of Karmayoga, yoga of action in the world. It is counterintuitive because action is in the battlefield and you are asked to engage in a slaughter. And yet, the possibility of Karma Yoga, even in that extreme context, is revealed. And this is the greatest book on Karma Yoga ever to be given to mankind. There is no parallel to the Gita anywhere in any literature, especially the spiritual literature. It's an exceptional book, and that is right at the heart of Yoga of Divine Works. The greatest gospel of spiritual works ever yet given to the race, the most perfect system of Karma Yoga known to man in the past, is to be found in the Bhagavad Gita. In that famous episode of the Mahabharata, the great basic lines of Karma Yoga are laid down for all time with an incomparable mastery and the infallible eye of an assured experience. Mahabharata, the epic literature of India, the epic poem of India, written by Vyasa. It is a portion of that, an episode. Gita is a part of that. And in that, the basic lines of Karma Yoga has been laid down with incomparable mastery, an infallible eye of an assured experience. It is someone who is writing from substantial experience of what he is writing. Kings and kingdoms and battle between the kings and the role of the king, the dharma of the king, all that. Vyasa was steeped in that experience and knowledge, and he brought forth through the life of Krishna. Krishna lived many millennia ago, and Vyasa uses that memory of the race and casts his profound poem, giving us the gospel of Karma Yoga. In that famous episode of Mahabharata, the great basic lines of Karma Yoga, are laid down for all time with an incomparable mastery and the infallible eye of an assured experience. It is true that the path alone, as the ancients saw it, is worked out fully. The perfect fulfillment, the highest secret, is hinted rather than developed. It is kept back as an unexpressed part of a supreme mystery. So in the Gita, what will happen if you follow the path of Karma Yoga? That is not developed. Instead, what Gita gives is, what is Karma Yoga? What are the main lines of its development? How the practice of Karma Yoga. Where it will lead, what kind of transformation you will reach, they're only hinted, not developed. So at one point, Sri Aurobindo was asked, is the yoga of the Gita lead to supramental realization? He would positively affirm, yes. It is implied in the Gita, but not explicitly stated anywhere in the entire Gita. It is true that the path alone, the path of Karma Yoga, that path alone, as the ancients saw it, is worked out fully. Path has been worked out fully in detail. Gita gives nuanced understanding of the path of Karma Yoga. The perfect fulfillment, the highest secret, is hinted rather than developed. The perfect fulfillment. So when you follow that path, where it will lead you, what kind of fulfillment, inner transformation, outer transformation, spiritual realizations, what are they? They are not developed, only hinted. It is kept back as an unexpressed part of a supreme mystery. It's held back, unexpressed. There are obvious reasons for this reticence. For the fulfillment is, in any case, a matter of experience, and no teaching can express it. A deep inner spiritual realization, the moment you mentally, verbally articulate it, it is already taking the infinity and making it a tiny, finite, limited expression. It can never, ever be the equal and transmit that full glory of experience. So no teaching can truly express this high experience that one can have. There are obvious reasons for this reticence. This reticence is hinting the possibility of where you reach, not explaining it. Because the fulfillment is in any case a matter for experience. You have to experience and no teaching can express it. there is no replacement for experience. Even if you read something that is an articulation of a deep inner experience, human tendency is to translate and transcribe it in terms of what you already know. That's a problem with the human mind and its limitation. It cannot be described in a way that can really be understood by a mind that has not the effulgent transmuting experience. A mind that doesn't yet have the experience cannot grasp when an experience is given to it in a form of a teaching. Whereas when the mind has the experience, when it reads, it recognizes immediately, yes, this is something I have experienced. That happens because you have the experience. Even when it is not profound spiritual experience, when we read something, we understand it because some part has already experienced it. It is that experience allowing us to recognize in a word, in a teaching, what is the underlying truth. And if the experience is not there, all the elaborate explanations will not have much value to you. On the other hand, when you especially have a effulgent, deep experience of that inner states, experience of the divinity in all things, when you read, you recognize. Especially when you read through the nuances of it, you recognize. Otherwise, mind tends to bundle everything together into one huge basket. After all, truth is one. All the realized beings experience the same thing. All religions tell the same truth. All spiritual masters teach the same thing. These are the baskets to which, these overgeneralizations to which we generally put everything into. Because without nuanced experience, mind cannot grasp the details. It cannot be described in a way that can really be understood by a mind that has not the effulgent transmuting experience. And for the soul that has passed the shining portals and stands in the blaze of the inner light, all mental and verbal description is as poor as it is superfluous, inadequate, and an impertinence. So that's the other side. When you have crossed the portals, the shining portals, the veil of light itself, when you cross into the other dimensions, into the effulgent experience of the luminous worlds beyond, then when you read, you know that no words can truly describe it. It becomes superfluous. So, for the soul that has passed the shining portals and stands in the blaze of the inner light, you are knowing things in your own self-luminous light. It is that deep sense of oneness of the radiant being and its light and its force. And that knowing, it's multi-sided, many-sided, omniscience and omnipotence opening up its doors and windows. And this cannot be captured by a linear mind and its narrow little set of words. It's impossible. Yet every master has attempted to bring back the knowledge, articulate in whatever limited way, whichever be the side of experience they have brought in. Give it a form, make it accessible to those who have at least a glimpse of the experience. Words do have a place, teachings do have a place, and yet we must keep in mind these are always a small, tiny glimpse of the original experience. All mental and verbal description is as poor as it is superfluous, inadequate, and an impertinence. All divine consummations have perforce to be figured by us in the inapt and deceptive terms of a language which was made to fit the normal experience of mental man. The language that we use for our daily communication, rather, language has developed in order to facilitate our normal communication. The experience of the inner realms and the higher spiritual realities, that has been experienced only by a small set of people, and their expression themselves, they have to use a language that otherwise was developed for ordinary purposes. Therefore, that higher experience get limited, deformed, and narrowed down in the process of articulation. That's a limitation with the language itself, because the language, very purpose of normal language that we use is to facilitate everyday life. Even for scientists to communicate among themselves, they have to develop a highly sophisticated language, particularly the language of mathematics, which an average human being cannot grasp, cannot understand. There are limitations of language. And when it comes to spiritual experiences, and when the master tried to articulate it into modern, our contemporary language, it gets lost in the expressions of language, limitations of words and phrases that are used for average daily routine life. So, in the inapt and deceptive terms of a language which was made to fit the normal experience of a mental man, mind. We are mental beings, and a mental man has to fit his ordinary experience into a language and articulate, and that is the language we try to use when a spiritual man tries to express it in terms of a mental man's limited, narrow language. So expressed, they can be rightly understood only by those who already know. So even when articulated in this narrow, limited language, it can be rightly understood only by those who already know. And knowing are able to give these poor external terms a changed, inner, transfigured sense. So there is another translation that is being automatically done by those who have the experience. They take on these words. They know that this metaphoric language is only an outer cover. Behind it is veiled a profound spiritual knowledge, and you decode it and you experience it inwardly because you already have tasted it. And that's why this metaphoric language, ordinary language, the masters use, using symbols and stories, they try to convey something profound, and the one who has experience can decode it, can know it. All divine consummations have perforce to be figured by us in the inapt and deceptive terms of a language which was made to fit the normal experience of mental man. So expressed, they can be rightly understood only by those who already know. And knowing are able to give these poor external terms a changed, inner, and transfigured sense. As the Vedic rishis insisted in the beginning, the words of the Supreme Wisdom are expressive only to those who are already of the wise. In the Vedas, the Vedic mantras, Vedic rishis, they have already made it clear. These mantras, these articulations done in a language that will be accessible to those who already found that experience. We can see it in Sri Aurobindo's own life. He was going through profound inner experiences, inner realization after realizations, and he couldn't find a good explanation even in the Upanishads. Upanishads were only hinting things. It is only when he read the Vedas he saw that all that he was experiencing was already described in the Vedas. And he could decode the Vedas because he had the experience. That's how he eventually wrote The Secret of the Veda, the hymns to the mystic fire, the transcription, translations, all that work he has done. Because based on his inner experience. It is not that he read the Vedas first and then arrived at experience. He had the experience. Based on the experience, when he read the Vedas, he understood the Vedas. Otherwise, the language of the Vedas are quite obscure, it's not following our normal rational thinking at all. It is profoundly symbolic and hidden meanings. So he could decode it because he had the experience. That helped him to decode it. So as the Vedic rishis insisted in the beginning of our current civilizational cycle, Vedas were in the very beginning. There they insisted. The words of the supreme wisdom are expressive only to those who are already of the wise. The Gita, at its cryptic close, may seem by its silence to stop short of that solution for which we are seeking. It poses at the borders of the highest spiritual mind and does not cross them into the splendors of the supramental light. Sri Aurobindo, his central focus was about the supermind. And in the Gita, we don't find references to the supermind directly brought in. And he says, it poses at the borders of the highest spiritual mind. Borders of the highest spiritual mind. We have our normal human mental consciousness with its rational intelligence. And beyond that, there are spiritual ranges of the mind. Sri Aurobindo meticulously maps all those ranges. He calls them like higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, overmind. And overmind is that border of the spiritual mind. It poses at the borders of the highest spiritual mind and does not cross them into the splendors of the supramental light. It is beyond the overmind, the supermind, according to Sri Aurobindo's mapping. And the Gita is on the edge, and it is only pointing at that. Here it is. Gita, at its cryptic close, may seem by its silence to stop short of that solution for which we are seeking. The solution we are seeking in Sri Aurobindo's entire writings, the key is supermind. He is always bringing us back to supermind is the key. Supermind is the solution. That is where the knowledge, will, and love, everything works together in unison. The multiplicity and oneness, unity and diversity, all works together. The dynamic oneness. It is there in supermind. And the Gita at its cryptic close may seem by its silence to stop short of that solution. It's not describing it at all. It is just stopping short of that solution for which we are seeking. It pauses at the borders of the highest spiritual mind and does not cross them into the splendors of the supramental light, which Sri Aurobindo would elaborate in his writings. It is his mission to bring that and articulate it in detail, because time on earth is of that supramental manifestation. Whereas in the period of Gita, the time of Gita, when humanity was going through that evolutionary stage, it was not yet the time for supermind to manifest, though Gita points towards it. And the Karmayoga, as it is laid down in the Gita, would lead towards it. And yet, it is its secret of dynamic and not only static identity with the inner presence. Its highest mystery of absolute surrender to the divine guide, Lord, and inhabitant of our nature is the central secret. The inner presence, the divine guide, Lord and inhabitant of our nature. The divinity has two aspects. One is static, other is dynamic. This coming together of the two, the secret of dynamic and not only static. This is the most key phrase for us to keep in mind. There is a dynamic side and there is the static side. Static side is the pure awareness, stillness, vastness, profound peace. Dynamic side is the Shakti, the creative, dynamic, creative force that is manifesting the worlds. These two together, they are inseparable. And this is the key. And the divine is both at the same time. It's one being in two different points. And this is the secret Gita points at. Yet it's secret of dynamic and not only static identity. There's a dynamic identification with the divine, not only a static identification. Static identification is when there is the so-called nirvikalpa samadhi, in which you are in a trance state. Many of the yogic schools give topmost importance to that samadhi, where you are in that deep inner trance, absorbed in that static oneness with the divine. Whereas the Gita is pointing at karma samadhi, brahma samadhi. That is where a dynamic oneness with the multiplicity of the universe and the dynamic divine in action, that is the divine Shakti in action actually. That is the key. The secret of dynamic and not only static identity with the inner presence. There is an inner presence which has the static and dynamic side. Its highest mystery of absolute surrender to the divine guide, Lord, and the inhabitant of our nature. Inhabitant. It is the immanent divine. Divine who is the inhabitant, who is residing in every particle, every form, everything that is moving and mobile and immobile, everything is inhabited by that, living and dead, everything is animated by that. It is that immanent divine. Oneness with that is the central secret. Whereas it is perfectly possible to ascend and to identify with the static oneness, where there is no multiplicity, it is formless oneness. Here, it requires the dynamic oneness that embraces multiplicity. So this is a profound secret that we need to understand, keep in mind. Sri Aurobindo will come to it again and again and again, because this is the missing point. In many spiritual schools, this is missed out, especially in articulation. Focus is largely on the formless, eternal, timeless. Whereas there is this dynamic self that is manifesting the worlds and pushing the evolution towards its intended purpose of revealing the divinity in matter. So its secret of dynamic and not only static identity with the inner presence, its highest mystery of absolute surrender to the divine guide, Lord, and inhabitant of our nature, is the central secret. This surrender is the indispensable means of the supramental change, and again, it is through the supramental change that the dynamic identity becomes possible. Supermind is that which is integrating both static and dynamic oneness. So therefore, supermind enables the dynamic identity with the divine, so that ascension into the supermind, supramental world, and bringing that into this material was the work of Sri Aurobindo that is now currently unfolding in the world. What then are the lines of Karmayoga laid down by the Gita? Its key principle, its spiritual method, can be summed up as the union of two largest and highest states or powers of consciousness, equality, and oneness. These are the keywords to Gita: equality and oneness. Their union, and these two, Sri Aurobindo is referring as the highest states or powers of consciousness. Equality is a power of consciousness, it's a state of consciousness. Oneness is a power of consciousness, it's a state of consciousness. Coming together of these two, equality and oneness, that's the secret of the Gita. Its spiritual method, its principle. What then are the lines of Karmayoga laid down by the Gita? Its key principle, its spiritual method, can be summed up as the union of two largest and highest states or powers of consciousness: equality and oneness. Our normal everyday life operations, we do not act out of equality. We are bound by the duality in which there is right, wrong, attraction, repulsion, liking, disliking, pleasant, unpleasant, biased towards one thing, bias against something else. There's hardly any equality. Similarly, oneness. We do not experience oneness. In theory, in philosophy, it is easy to accept there is an underlying oneness. But our actual experience of life, about ourselves, we experience ourselves to be clearly a separate entity. We cannot experience someone else the way that person is experiencing themselves. We cannot experience an animal the way the animal is knowing itself. We cannot know a tree the way a tree is knowing itself. There is a very clear cognitive barrier, separation. Oneness is not our normal experience, nor equality. Both are not there. And yet, there are these two powers of consciousness, two states of consciousness where there is oneness, there is equality. And they are the key principles and the spiritual method of the Gita. The kernel of its method is an unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as in our inner self and spirit. The very kernel of the method, where these two principles come together, equality and oneness, if these are to be arrived at, an unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as in our inner self and spirit. Because this equality and oneness are essentially the qualities, attributes of the divine consciousness. Therefore, that acceptance of the divine in our life as in our inner self and spirit. So all our inner movements as well as all our outer movements and engagements, interactions, everywhere and in everything, accepting the presence of the divine. This is the very foundation, very starting point, an unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as in our inner self and spirit. An inner renunciation of personal desire leads to equality. Now, further details. How to arrive at equality? inner renunciation of personal desire. Personal desire is our normal motivation for action. If we renounce that personal motivation driven by desire, we are opening a door to equality. Easy in theory, not that simple in practice. Yet, this is the demand of the Gita. An inner renunciation. Often, in the later decline period of Indian history, India's spiritual development, renunciation became material level renunciation, giving up of your material wealth, your financial gains, your relationships, everything, giving up of external strings of attachment. Instead of that external renunciation, Gita is pointing at an inner renunciation of personal desire. It's a huge shift. When you do not have a personal desire, you have a condition of equality with which you can handle material wealth, money, relationships, organizations, teams, social action, everything can be done from a completely different place, which is free from personal desire. So that's the door opening. So an inner renunciation of personal desire leads to equality, accomplishes our total surrender to the divine. So we have 4 words coming together: equality, oneness, and an unreserved acceptance of the divine in all things, outside, inside, in all movements. And renunciation of desire, that is opening the door to equality. And that accomplishes our total surrender to the divine. Even when we accept the divine in all things, surrendering to the divine in practice requires, demands the renunciation of desire. This supports a delivery from dividing ego, which brings us oneness. That's where the next step is. From equality, we are moving towards a delivery from the ego that divides. Ego is that which organizes all the experiences around this sense of me, I, me, and myself, my life, my body, my existence. It separates the rest of existence from me and the other or others. That ego boundary, that sense of separation has to be gradually removed. And the condition for removing that boundary is this, first of all, renouncing the personal desire as a motivation for all action. And that leads to a deep surrender to the divine. And that surrender supports the delivery from the dividing ego, which brings us oneness. So when the ego boundaries begin to melt, dissolve, there is a fusion of life with life, mind with mind, soul with soul. That is where we begin to experience oneness. So on one hand, we have life that is bound or driven by desire and ego, these two together. And we need to loosen up these knots. And when we renounce desire, we are able to gradually enter into deep surrender to the divine and experience of equality, which is a quality of the divine. And as it deepens, as that presence and equality deepens, it will deliver us from the dividing ego, and we are able to merge into a deeper sense and experience of oneness. It sounds so simple, straightforward, yet only when we step into that journey, we discover our own inner complexity that often refuse to follow our understanding. Mind can understand, mind can have this knowledge, but in practice, there are all these parts of being having its own reactions, individuality, demanding their own fulfillment. So it's not that simple, yet the main stream, the main lines of practice, arriving at this oneness and equality by surrendering to the divine, because oneness and equality are the qualities of the divine. And to do that surrender, to experience oneness, we need to renounce desire. And when we renounce desire, equality and deep surrender to the divine happens, and that opens the door to experience of oneness. Here now Sri Aurobindo comes a very critical detail, but this must be a oneness in dynamic force, and not only in static peace and inactive beatitude. So our inner growth has these two dimensions, two aspects. One is static, other is dynamic. It is perfectly possible to go inward and experience the peace. And often, the more we experience that beautiful peace inside, during our meditations, when our senses are all indrawn and thoughts all subside, emotions subside, we experience a deep inward absorption where there is a profound peace and stillness, a deep quietude. And we will not even feel like coming out of it because it's so peaceful, so harmonious. But that leads us towards a liberation, which is essentially a withdrawal from the world into the deep inner static self. And Sri Aurobindo distinguishes between the static self and the dynamic self. The pure awareness free from the entanglement with life and its complexity, ability to stand back in the profound peace and a deep inner absorption. That's a wonderful pathway towards liberation, but it is insufficient for an integral yoga which requires and demands a oneness in dynamic force. There is an experience of oneness in the static dimension of our being, where there is an inactive beatitude, where we feel blessed to be in that absorption, glad and joyful with profound gratitude. We can be there without having any urge to engage with life at all. An inner absorption, an inner fulfillment. But it is not the dynamic oneness because it is an absorption into the formless oneness. It is when the dynamic oneness is to be embraced. It is the dynamic oneness where the multiplicity is held together in oneness, where differentiation is held together in oneness. in harmony. Multiplicity on the foundation of unity. Only when that is experienced, we can comprehend the riddle of existence, where there is a manifest world thriving and evolving, but there is an underlying oneness to it. And this manifest world is not an illusion. It is a progressive unfolding and revelation of the underlying oneness and that spiritual light and love and delight that is upholding everything. So the very material envelope become a transparent robe through which this can express. But to arrive at that, we need to open ourselves to the dynamic oneness and its force. That oneness in dynamic force, and not only in static peace and inactive beatitude. This is really the core of integrality, the dynamic and static coming together, a deep inner realization in the static oneness and outer outpouring in the dynamic oneness of life, of existence, of the multitude in which we exist. These two together is the integrality and integral yoga's fulfillment. So, this must be a oneness in dynamic force and not only in static peace or inactive beatitude. The Gita promises us freedom for the spirit even in the midst of works and the full energies of nature. So the Gita is not asking for a nirvikalpa samadhi, withdrawing from life and its activities, withdrawing into the static oneness, but it is necessary to have a foundation in that static oneness, liberation in that oneness, that being that sthita prajna in that, and from there to pour into this dynamic oneness of existence where the multiplicity is thriving on the foundation of oneness. And that is the demand and the secret of the Gita. So therefore, the realization comes in the midst of works. Therefore, a karma samadhi is possible. Oneness under the conditions of work in action, in life, embracing the totality of the multiplicity surrounding us and opening to the full energies of nature. If we accept subjection of our whole being to that which is higher than the separating and limited ego. So this possibility of embracing the multiplicity in oneness, the dynamic force of oneness in oneness, that is possible only when we are able to open ourselves to a greater force than our surface personality and its limiting ego. That breaking of the boundaries, opening to the immense diversity and the full energies of nature, which allows us to embrace the vaster action, and that is possible only when we open to that which is beyond us. Accept the subjection of our whole being, entire being, every layer, the mind, the heart, the energy, the senses, the body, everything, entire instrumentation. Accept the subjection of our whole being to that which is higher than the separating and limiting ego. It proposes an integral dynamic activity. The Gita and its yoga proposes an integral dynamic activity. It is integral because it is combining the static and the dynamic, the formless and the multiplicity together. One of the typical problem in many schools you encounter is that when we withdraw from the outer nature and go into the inward absorption into the samadhi states, eventually into the deep oneness of that formless reality, then the manifest world would appear to be an illusion, insignificant. It is when we are able to open to the dynamic side of the divine, then only the significance of the manifest world and its reality and its divine truth unfolding progressively through evolution become visible, become real. Otherwise, we will go through that formless oneness which sees the world, the manifest world, as an illusion. Whereas the Gita is giving a method in which we are able to experience an integral dynamic activity founded on a still passivity. So, an activity on the foundation of an absolute stillness. The two extremes are brought together: stillness and movement, inaction and profound activity, married together in a deep oneness. It proposes an integral dynamic activity founded on a still passivity. Passivity. There is stillness, there is a passivity. Upon that ground, a dynamic force enters. The dynamic side of the divine enters and flows through you, embracing the diversity, thriving in the diversity, and flowing forward, taking forward the evolutionary purpose in manifestation. The divine Shakti who pours into the instrumental nature. A largest possible action irrevocably based on an immobile calm is its secret. A largest possible action by this tiny little human instrument when it can open profoundly inward, opening to the great force that enters, and that one acts irrevocably based on an immobile calm is its secret. In fact, when we strip aside all the religious formations that came after Buddha in the name of Buddhism, when we essentially look into the Buddha's teachings, what he is teaching is to arrive at that liberated state in that vast calm, freedom of the liberated inner being and entering into the world of action. There is something else. The individual mold is dissolved. A universal, vaster self is acting through that. A profound action, the largest possible action. We can say Sri Buddha was the most powerful man in Indian history who produced such an immense impact in humanity, even now powerfully effective. But just like Christ has to be recovered from Christianity, we have to rediscover Buddha from various schools that emerged after him, diversified in various branches, declared the world to be unfit field of misery and the very purpose of life itself, ending of rebirth and a liberation. But essentially, when we go back to the essence of Buddha, the teaching is arriving at the deep inner profound calm and stillness, liberated still passivity of our formless being. Upon that foundation, there is this profound dynamic being pours in and acts and pushes the evolution forward. So it proposes an integral dynamic activity founded on a still passivity, a largest possible action irrevocably based on an immobile calm is its secret. Free expression out of a supreme inward silence. Free expression out of a supreme inward silence. Supreme inward silence. So there is deep silence, deep passivity, deep immobile calm, stillness. That is the condition that will develop inwardly. It is equanimous. There is a profound equality to the entire life that is around. Through that, there is a complete surrender to the divine in existence. And that opens the doors of oneness with the totality. So there is equality, oneness, and renunciation of desire and personal motivation in action. When that is removed, there is opening to the possibility of equality and a deep surrender to the divine. And when that surrender deepens, then there is an opening to oneness. So equality, oneness, renunciation of desire, dissolving of the ego. It is the core of the teaching. Karma Yoga at its simplest, deepest core. So let me read this once again. The Gita promises us freedom for the spirit. Even in the midst of works and the full energies of nature, if we accept subjection of our whole being to that which is higher than the separating and limiting ego. It proposes an integral dynamic activity founded on a still passivity, a largest possible action irrevocably based on an immobile calm is its secret. Free expression out of a supreme inward silence. Your thoughts, your words arise from that supreme, profound silence, deep calm, vast inner freedom, stillness. On one hand, you are in impersonal vastness. On the other hand, there is this profound intimacy of oneness with the larger existence. Entire multiplicity embraced in a profound oneness, with a deep equality towards all things in existence. What a beautiful state of being to arrive at, to engage with the world and its evolutionary unfolding. And this is the deepest secret the Gita is offering us. So with that, we come to the end of this episode. And I would highly recommend you click on the bell icon so that you get notification to the episodes that are getting published. I was told recently by someone that he was not getting the notification. And that bell icon that you see is something that you need to click on so that you get the notification on YouTube if you're using YouTube. And please do share your insights. That will be wonderful. It will help others to get insights from you. Learn from each other. It's a shared journey. I'm just sharing my own joy of studying synthesis of yoga and rich immersion in Sri Aurobindo's world. And see you next week. Thank you.